Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. It's Sid. Statistics. Hey, I got another goodie today. Where do I start with this gentleman? There's so much to talk about the name and the accolades. This gentleman played his high school hockey on the range for the Blue Devils back in the day under Coach Hendrickson. After that, he moved on out to Colorado to play for the Tigers, where he had a phenomenal four-year career out there with the Colorado Tigers, CC Tigers. I think over, I don't know how many points. Still talk about that. So there he moved on to play a little international and a little pro. Played in some national teams for USA and, of course, in the Olympics in 1976, which we'll discuss. Some players on there from my hometown. We can talk about others. And then after that, moved into Europe. Had a very good career, a short career, but a good one playing in Europe. Some teams we'll discuss that there. But after that, went on to coach and started coaching back in Minnesota, where he first started to coach. I believe it was I think Northfield. Maybe I'm wrong, but of course with Northfield, Blaine, Virginia one year, I think. But then went on to end up coaching with men's and women's or high school boys and girls hockey for Roseville, where he took his teams to state tournaments in both levels, both girls and boys. So that's pretty phenomenal. Nominated in the Minnesota Coaches Association Hockey Hall of Fame. So that's another accolade. Also, had a son, by the way, a couple sons that he coached, and one went on to CC, followed his footsteps, but ended up being a Holy Baker Award winner. So, I mean, the list goes on and on with this gentleman, where he just a lot of accolades, and of course, the last name he had a brother that was a heck of a coach too over at college at UMD. So I'm sure there's many other things I forgot. There's just so much to talk about with this gentleman. But I'm very excited to bring on Mr. Steve Sertich to my broadcast today. Steve, how you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. I got you. I'm sure I missed something. There's just so many things. They're looking at the laundry list of, the Sertich name, and your brother's name, and the sons. I mean, wow, where do we start? So, but that's where I'm gonna start. Let's go back to where it all started. When you were a youth, I always like to talk about how you get into hockey. Obviously, you know, the ring is pretty much we're born with our skates on, they say up north. But um, who was influential as a youth when playing? And did you play all your games as a youth, indoor, outdoor? Where did it all start?
Yeah, we were lucky. The Miners Memorial Building was built probably in the early '60s, so it was good timing for me. My brother and his groups, about 5 years older, played outside and practiced outside, and they got to play inside, obviously, in high school. But my dad built a full-size rink on the north side part of Virginia, so that's really where I spent most of my time as a kid.
You know, outdoor, that's where you learn the game away from the structured hockey, right? Then the
Yeah.
knee, that's fun. So you moved on to play high school. I'm going to pull up a picture. I got some comments on this, and this one here. So talk about this picture here. It says 1970. It says in your yearbook. By the way, where did the nickname Luber come from? I'm just curious about that. I saw that, and I see that's in your email. So this picture here is with Coach. Can you talk about Coach Hendrickson first of all, and then we'll get into the nickname because I'm thinking maybe it was because you did the Brill Cream or Vitalis back in it. I don't know.
No, actually, it was a neighborhood deal, and there's not really an interesting story behind it, other than it stayed with me for a lifetime. But I've really felt fortunate that Dave Hendrickson came to Virginia to coach. Ironically, he was from Eveleth, 5 miles away, and our great rival for all those years. But Dave was a really intelligent hockey man, and he became the head coach my junior year, and I really didn't play much as a sophomore, believe it or not. And I felt like I really blossomed when he came, and I always enjoyed having him as a coach.
Awesome. Can you discuss on playing in high school when you made it to the varsity? Some other players that maybe stuck out that I think there's a team I think went on to play at college with you as well. But there's some players that stick out that maybe we would not have known without you telling us about.
Well, probably the best. We didn't really have a great team, Sid. We were pretty good at my junior year. We had Billy Cipolla, who ended up playing at Michigan State. We had Sam Maloney that played at Yale. But for the most part, we were pretty much an average team up there. the teams were so strong back in those days, and um, like I said, we were just kind of middle of the road. But I wanted to mention a couple guys that were really important as a young player before high school. One of them was Pat Finnegan. Pat Finnegan was a great player from Eveleth. I think he played in the first state tournament. He played on a national team, and his family was like 5 houses away from me. And he was a really important coach as a young player. Another guy was Jim Paget. Actually, Page was the recreation director in Virginia, but he ran the Miners Memorial, and he was our coach, our Bantam coach, and was very influential to a lot of young players at that time. So I was lucky to have exposure to people at that caliber.
Awesome. That last name when you mentioned Finnegan, I think it brings back memories of a state tournament. There was a hockey player named his name was Herm Finnegan. I don't know if that's the same relation, but I don't know. But I mean, just
No,
sorry.
but Pat Finnegan's grandson played at Duluth East in the state tournament against in that famous Apple Valley game, and went on and played. I think he played junior and semi-pro, but the Finnegan family had 3 boys, and they were all gifted players too. Maybe not as good as their grandpa, but they were awfully good too.
So, like I said, it's a lot of second generation, third generation names, and everything kind of started from the range, and everything spun out different parts of the country, great coaches and stuff. So let's talk a little bit. I threw up the rink there. Just this is just the same. Nothing much changed. I showed that when you were talking about the rink miners there, but pretty much same as it was back then. I'm assuming. And I broadcast the state tournament. I think they're Bantam some years ago. It's just great facility.
It was a great old rink. I did get a couple of benches before they tore it all down, so I have them here up at the lake, which is great. But a lot of good memories down there. One of my favorite memories actually watching International Falls in the mid 60s. And, my brother Mike he graduated in 65, but the Tim Sheehy years and watching Larry Ross and the Broncos, I mean, we were all just in awe of what they did. I mean, I think they won over 50 games in a row there a couple of years, and just amazing times in that building.
Pretty cool. That's what this is all about. Talking memories. Talking memories. So let's move on. And I know you moved on to CC, and I'm curious as to how that came about. How did you end up on Colorado College? Can you give me a little background on that before we jump into
Well,
that?
yeah, ironically, John Matcheffs from Eveleth was the CC head coach, and he came up every summer to his lake place, and his best friend was Pat Finnegan. So I knew John Matcheffs as a kid growing up, and it was almost kind of a natural thing. I mean, he always said he wanted to get several guys from the range out to CC, and he ended up recruiting Dougie Palazzari from Eveleth, myself, and then Jim Skelko from Gilbert. And John was, he had quite a reputation. Obviously, he was a silver medal winner in '56, and when I went to visit, it was a no-brainer for me.
And there's a lot of history out there. We'll discuss that. So you mentioned the name too when you talked about it. I threw a picture of John. I put that USA picture because we'll get to that when he played his team. But some other players and coaches there too. John was there, but I want to throw up another. I think he said this gentleman coached a few years too when you were there. That's Coach Sauer there. As you can see, he's wearing the CC college coach. So
Right.
talk about Coach Sauer a little bit before. Yeah, I mean, he did struggle a little bit looking at I think he struggles there as a team, but I always have a saying, you gotta learn how to lose before you learn how to win. Because he went on to obviously Wisconsin and held a program in Wisconsin. Nothing against CC there, Steve, but that's where he made his name as coaching the Badgers.
Yeah, Jeff was actually a CC player. He came out of St. Paul, Washington High School, I believe, and he came in after my first year. John Matcheffs ended up coaching us our freshman year, and then went to Air Force. And I just wanted to say, a comment about Matches before we move on to Sauer, but Matches was probably the most brilliant hockey mind I've ever been around. I had Bob Johnson and Jeff Sauer and some others, but Matches saw things that most didn't, and almost too much, if you can believe that. I mean, I remember some of his practices. He would go off on a tangent, and we'd be standing there for half an hour, as he explained, and it was all great stuff, but it was really hard to
This
put. Yeah, I mean, he was just brilliant. He probably should have played. He probably should have coached, at an international level, I think. But he went to Air Force, and Jeff came in my sophomore year, and it was kind of a fun transition for us because it was a lot lighter and more fun. And Jeff obviously didn't have the basic knowledge of coaching at that point in his life, like a Matches, but it was really fun to play for him. And we didn't have great teams there, but we had a good run there for a while. And Dougie was there, and we had some Canadian kids that were outstanding players. So it was a really good experience overall.
before I pull up the picture, I was going to say, was Matches kind of a maybe Herbie like Herb Brooks got maybe some of the ideas from because he it sounded like he was the type of guy that was doing things that were international or just in his mind was ahead of the game. And you guys, like you said, it was more where the head was so much.
Yeah,
It
I
sounded
would
like he
put
was
him in
very
that
confident.
class. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let me pull up this guy because he said that he Matches said that Paul or got guys from the range and I said, hey, by the way, I got NBA hair envy of you and him. Sorry, the glare from the lights in the room here. But so talk about him as a teammate because you guys you did pretty well out there at CC. Looking at the points, well, you may not have did that well as a team per se, but your points, you guys both did pretty well out there.
Yeah, Dougie and I were rivals, all the way up. He was in Eveleth. They had great teams. He was a great player. And when Mattress got us both out there, I had to room with him the first year, and I didn't know if I'd be able to do that with a guy from Eveleth, but
Sure.
he was an amazing hockey player. I think one of the great offensive guys. I mean, he was 5'5" and just a bull out there. And his dad, by the way, played in the NHL back in the, I think, 30s or 40s, probably the 40s. But Dougie was an All-American and Player of the Year, I think, 2 times in the WCHA when those were good WCHA years, product-wise. So he was a top player, and one of the things that we were able to do that was unique, I think, was we had a John Mattress power play that everybody called the CC power play, and we got a lot of points off it. And it took a long time for teams to defense it, really, because it was very unusual. It wasn't all that different, it was just a give and go 2-on-1, but it was well known in the league. I think probably more so than us winning games was that power play that we had.
Okay. Now I looked at your career out there. I mean, you mentioned 70, 71. You had 27 games, 13 points. But then you progressively got better, Steve, looking at this 71, 72, 32 games, you had 35 points, so over a point a game, and got higher 72, 73, 34 games, you had 53 points. And then in the last year, 61. So, that's like almost 2 points a game there. So, and you said that the whole CC power play have a lot to do with that. You guys scored a lot of points in those power plays.
We did. Yeah, that was probably the thing that kept us going there for the most part.
Okay. Now, I want to throw up a picture. I want you to talk about this gentleman because you talk about the whole background with this, and we ended up marrying because I don't think many people know this name, but discuss this gentleman right there.
That's Tony Frasca. When I got to CC, Tony was actually the baseball coach. He came out of Boston, actually Boston Latin School, where Patrick Ewing came out of, and he was a 3 all-state sport athlete in Boston: football, baseball, and hockey. And he was recruited back. Well, probably would have been the early 50s. And when he came out to Colorado, he didn't qualify to get into school because of his grades. So he had to go to junior college down in Pueblo, about 30 miles away, which is where he ended up meeting his wife to be. But Tony had 7 kids, and I happened to meet one of his daughters, one of his 4 daughters, I guess, and we became a couple during my years at CC. And Tony was there as a baseball coach. He also ran our rink. We had a practice rink on campus at CC at the time. So he was a very well known, funny, great character, and he showed us a few things on the ice every once in a while too. But he was a great father-in-law.
That's awesome. I just wanted to make sure I, pointed it out for people because there's a history there, and it was a cool picture too. I saw Con wearing the CC jersey and that, so I just had to bring that up.
Yeah, they
Well,
won. They won at Altsid in I think 52. They won the national
oh
championship.
wow,
CC was. They actually hosted the national tournament back in the beginning of the NCAA hockey, and they won it in 52. And he and Matches both played against each other. Matches was an All-American at Michigan. Tony was an All-American at CC. So it's funny how those, connected in my lifetime.
that's pretty cool. I'm glad you pointed that out. So very interesting to talk about that. So after college, you got involved, or during college, wherever you got. How did you end up getting sought out by the national team? And then, of course, the Olympic team will bring that up. But what became of that? Who said, "Come on, let's have you try out"? And lo and behold, you played in the '76 team.
Yeah, it started with Bob Johnson, who was the head coach at Wisconsin at that time, and
There he is.
Bob was the national. He was chosen as the national U.S. national coach in '73, right after the '72 games, and he put together, college teams. We and I was selected. Dougie and I both went over to Graz, Austria in '73 with the U.S. team, and then the next year, after my senior year in '74, we played over in Ljubljana, Yugoslavia, and then I I had intentions of trying to stay in it to play in the Olympics, and they had the amateur status at that time. So after college, I went to Europe because we were officially amateur playing over there at that time.
Yep.
So I spent a year in Germany, and then in '76, we had the Olympics in Innsbruck, and Bob was the head coach for that too.
That sounds like, I think, wasn't when I talked to Buzzy Schneider. I think he played the exact same thing you did.
Yeah,
And I'm trying to find what was that team he played on over there. I think I had who's on? Let me see that. Remember this logo here? I think I got a little logo right there. Is
yeah,
that the logo? I don't know.
that was the team I played on for 1 year out of college. Yeah, it's Houston. They were actually a perennial champion in their top league in Germany for a long time. I think I might have been the first foreign player. They started. They could have 2 imports on their team, and that year I was with Eli Volacek, who was a kid out of Toronto that played at Michigan Tech, and he and I were teammates. And Ellie actually stayed in Germany and made a career out of it, probably almost 20 years. But Buzzy also had to stay amateur, and he played with us on the national team, I think, in '74, '75, and then he was my line mate actually in the '76 Olympics.
Okay. By the way, you led that team in scoring over the Tucson. It was the 40 points in 36 games. Again, continuing your going moving up in the points there as you get older. So not bad at all. So yeah. Let's pull up that squad. So I was looking at, first of all, I wanted to point out, looking at the national team before you went on the Olympics teams. 63 games, 71 points. Not bad there too, Steve. You didn't do too bad in that international play.
Yeah,
Behind you,
no,
fourth behind him before you go. Dovick, who I've talked about in other conversations. Steve Jensen, may he rest in peace too. Steve had a good 96 points. Bob Miller, then yourself, with 71 in 63 games. So, and Buzzy had 70. So, not bad, not bad before you jump into the Olympics.
Yeah, no, we had some good players. I mean, Steve obviously ended up having a great pro career, and Bobby Miller played it with the Bruins for a while, and I think we had Dan Bolduc also had some NHL experience. So we didn't win any. We lost that last game for a bronze medal, which was a tough way to go. But we had a decent group of guys.
Yeah, let me pull up that picture to that squad because I talk about other guys that I've interviewed around the squad. There's three from my hometown: Blaine Comstock, Robbie Harrison, of course, Coach Gary Rossi coached me in high school. Yeah, there's that squad. I like this picture. It's a good, red, white, and red, and mostly blue. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's a good looking team picture right there.
yeah, that was a fun time, and I spent a lot of time with your Roseau compatriots. Comer was my roommate on the road, and Roscoe and Robbie was on my line. And Roscoe is a great story because he started out at North Dakota and played a little bit at Bemidji State, and was a solid defenseman for us. So great guys, fun hockey players to spend time with.
Yeah. So who's okay? So where are you at here? I'm trying my eyes. I'm looking for the slick hair in there. Are you
On the lower right hand side, first row.
the guy wearing the C? Is that you?
That was me. Yeah, I was one of the
Oh,
captains.
by God. Hey, I did not realize that. Well, geez, one more accolade I missed on that. Son of a gun, say, boy, I better do better due diligence on this. I can't believe I missed that one. But so yeah, so I just, that's so far. I mean, it's just accolades. You go from one team to another team to another team, and you're just doing well internationally. And you finished up over there in Europe, if I recall, after the Olympics. And that was a tough time. I remember talking to Lefty about '72. I mean, we're talking about the Cold War, and you were in Europe. So how can you just give me the experience of being in that area? During that whole time, obviously going up a little bit more hairier come 1980, but because it is kind of that Cold War era, excuse me.
Yeah, no, that's it was a unique time, obviously. I remember we were on tour. I can't remember exactly the year, but we were going to Prague, and man, we crossed the border from Germany to Prague in our bus, and they just tore it apart, and made it really miserable. We were there for hours as they went through the whole thing, um, and the Czechs were, it was Czechoslovakia back then, and they were amazing teams. I mean, obviously the Red Army team, the Russians were the dominant team, but the Czechs were right with them. So there was a little bit of that animosity, I guess, as we were playing against some of these teams that we were at odds with politically and worldwide too. Um, but they were awfully good. They were really, really well coached and well trained teams.
Was your excuse me, and I'm just trying to go back from memory. I'm interviewing many people. Was that Doctor Nagotas? Was he doctor of the team, or is it someone else at that time?
Yeah, no, Dr. Nagabods was with us. He was with our national team in maybe
Okay,
the early, or in the 73, 74 time, but he wasn't with us at the Olympics.
okay.
Bob had a doctor from the Madison area because we were based out of Madison that year.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm just curious because I know when Lefty was talking about Doc, he was talking about this and that, and having come from Latvia, I believe was Riga, telling stories about that time, where to go and where not to go, and that it sounded like when you went to the border, the Czechs definitely entered that border. They went through like a fine tooth comb, and like my hair, I mean, it's pretty fine, so I wouldn't want to be in that situation. So, but interesting. Yeah, and I remember I just interviewed Group Yorkman and Bob Harris. Bob was talking about Robbie and being over in Madison. So you mentioned that, it makes sense that Coach Johnson would have had someone of his own. So, but well, moving on then, when I talk about that you go on, if you finished up over there, and after that went into high school, and here is coaching high school hockey and women's hockey and boys hockey. So how did you get involved with where you first started? I think you went back. Was it Northfield or Virginia? I forget, where did you first start going? Let's talk about that a little bit. How
Yeah,
did you get involved
after
with it?
after finishing the Olympics in '76, I decided that was it. I mean, emotionally and physically, I wasn't interested in playing anymore. So I had a teaching degree from CC, and I interviewed a couple different places, but I got a job in Northfield, and Northfield, they were getting ready for their first year of high school hockey that year. So they had built the citizens and a hockey group in town built a private rink, and it opened that year, and it was one of those great years, as a teacher coach. I mean, it was a fun experience in so many ways. The families and their hockey interest was so high, and they were so happy to finally get a high school team. And my wife and we both taught there, and it was a really fun year. And then Virginia opened up. Dave Hendrickson retired from coaching. And I thought, well, if I want to do anything in coaching, it's to coach up on the Iron Range would be a jump up. And so I left and spent a year in Virginia. And I really, for many years, look back at it, regretted leaving Northfield, because I think that would have been a great place to raise a family and stay with a program. But I had high hopes of, doing something in coaching. And Virginia didn't work out very good for me. I mean, I just never felt comfortable going, they say you never can go home.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I just didn't want to stay there. So I started looking at going back to playing. So after 2 years, I hooked on with a team in Nuremberg, Germany. So I went back in 78 and played 2 years in Nuremberg in the second league in Germany. And my first game there, I hadn't played in a game for 2.5 years. And, I didn't know what was going to happen. I trained on my own and everything. And, I think I got 5 goals in my first game there, and people were just going berserk, right? But it was the second league in Germany. It wasn't the top league.
Yeah,
But anyhow,
still.
it was crazy. I mean, my poor wife, who, I was taking her, I took her to Northfield, I took her to Virginia, and then back to Germany. And she was a saint to stay with me through all of that. But I played 2 years, and then I played with another Michigan Tech kid by the name of Bruce Abbey. He was a defenseman out of London, Ontario. And I played with Glenn Patrick a little bit from the Patrick family, Craig Patrick's brother.
Yes.
And I made some great friendships. I still, have friends from my time in Nuremberg too. So it was great. It was a great time.
Well, let's just point out too, for those that watch this, 78, 79, 38 games. Guess how many points Steve had? 91. Granted, you said it was League Two, but still, it's professional hockey, Steve. I don't care anybody. 91 points in 38 games. You're doing something right. 50 goals and 41 assists. And then the second year, not as many games, 29 games, but 26 Tinos and 33 apples for 59 points. So I think you did okay, my friend. I think you did okay.
Yeah, I actually hurt my knee that second year. I didn't play as much, and kind of saw the writing on the wall and felt like it was time to go home.
Understood. So speaking about going home, and then tell me how you ended up back in. You ended up in NCAA. It says CC. Ended up being an assistant out there. Who moved you back there? How'd that happen?
Well, at CC,
Yeah.
my wife's family started a pizza business in Colorado Springs, and when we went back after that last year of playing, we decided to open a second location of the pizza place in Colorado Springs in a different part of town. And we did that. We owned a little pizza shop on the north side of Colorado Springs, and a teammate of mine, Mike Birch, became the head coach after Jeff Sauer left. And so I volunteered for a couple of years with the Tigers, and it just was too much. I mean, I couldn't do justice to both, and we had 3 little kids, and I did end up volunteering at one of the high schools, Palmer High School, for a year or 2 also. And then we got an offer to move the pizza business to Minnesota. And so that's what my wife and I did in
Okay.
87. We opened one up in Roseville.
So before I go any further, two things. Is that pizza joint still in business today out there in Colorado?
The family still has the original Colorado
Okay.
College location, and there's one in Fort Collins, and there's trying to think. My daughter actually had one in Florida, but she recently closed it. So yeah, there's still a couple locations still going.
Okay. So when I go watch the Tigers play this winter when I'm out there, when out there this winter, I will have to take a look it up.
Look it up. It's Panino's, and it's only 3 blocks from the new arena in
Oh,
Colorado Springs.
perfect. That'll be easy to remember. So I'll have to do that. And then, so in moving back here to Coach and Blaine, then, so is that location still open too, by the way?
The one in Roseville?
Yeah, Roseville, excuse me, when you came back here.
Yeah, no, that one closed. There
Okay.
is one in Shoreview actually, where
Oh, okay.
the people that followed me, who my sister-in-law and her husband opened that one up. They don't own it anymore, but it's still in Shoreview, not far from
Okay.
where Buzzy lives, by the way.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe you can have some lunch with them sometime. Just saying that, you started it, so it's continuing on today. So that, it started, it was in good hands when it started. So it's still in business today. That's why I was mentioning that. So I wanted to go back to when you talked about assisting out there. I'm just trying to get a gauge and let people know the difference, and not that there's anything, wrong with Colorado hockey, but you assisted at Palmer. I looked at that. So can you talk about coaching there? And obviously hockey's gotten much bigger, 30, 40 years later. But back then, and then coaching back in Minnesota, what was the differences you saw in terms of the high school hockey out there and high school hockey now in Minnesota, which is tough to compare, but I just wanted your thoughts on that real quick.
Yeah, back then it wasn't even close to our high school hockey in Minnesota. There was some decent players around. We actually had a couple of walk-ons at CC from some local kids that played. In fact, um, Tony Frasca's son Trip played when I was there for a couple of years. He was in and out of the lineup, but there were only a few that went on past high school at that time. And now it's pretty darn good. I mean, there's some guys from the in the that have played in the NHL now out of those high school teams, currently. So it's come a long way. But back then, they weren't as skilled and as deep as Minnesota teams. Not even close.
Sure. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts were. I'm not trying to diss anybody or anything like that, but I was just curious about Colorado versus Minnesota, even at that time. So let's talk a little about then you moved back here, you ended up going, I saw Blaine. Blaine, how did that come about? And let's talk a little
Yeah,
about the brief stint
this
you had
is
at Blaine.
this is this is kind of an interesting story. So we're living in Roseville, and we're doing the restaurant thing there, and I take my kids public skating at Roseville Arena because we lived in town in the city, and
Okay.
there's a young girl skating around with a Colorado College sweatshirt on.
Huh.
So I go over to her. I said, "Hey, where did you get that from?" And she said, "Well, my dad played hockey at Colorado College." And I said, "Really? What's his name?" And she said, "Wayne Nelson." Now, Wayne Nelson was a kid from Minneapolis, played, I can't remember his high school. It's no longer there. It might have been Marshall. But anyhow, Wayne played hockey and baseball at CC before I was there. I never had met him at that point, but knew the name. And so I contacted Wayne and found out that Wayne was the head coach at Blaine High School. And I had some extra time, so I was hoping to get involved in hockey, in the cities. And I actually went over one time to talk to Gordy Gens, if you remember that name from
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Roseville,
I remember.
for
Of
many
course.
years, right? And I asked him, I said, are you interested in a volunteer coach? He goes, no, we're okay. So then I went to Wayne Nelson and he said, yeah, come up and help us. So for 2 years, I would drive up to Blaine after working at the restaurant, and I helped Wayne with some really pretty good teams at Blaine High School at that time. We came really close to getting to the state tournament. We had a goalie by the name of Tom Newman, who ended up playing
Yep.
for the
Yep.
Gophers, and Jimmy Hillman, who also played for the Gophers, and his son did too. So we had some great talent up there, and it was kind of my way to get into coaching high school hockey in the cities, because I got to do the Fish Hockey School. I don't know if you remember that name at all, but That was started by a guy by the name of Mike McGraw. You know Mike, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you
Who
can't forget
used
Mike with the
yeah,
glasses.
yeah. So so one thing led to another. I left the pizza business and I decided to go back to teaching and coaching. And um, I was working for Mike McGraw at the Fish Hockey School out of Blaine in the summer. And he said, "Hey, I'm leaving my position. I'm going to go into administration. Why don't you apply for the job?" So I applied for a teaching job. He was teaching in Richfield. So I uh, ended up getting the job in Richfield and found out after I got the teaching job that the hockey coach there was Mike Thomas. And Mike Thomas is a former Virginia guy, well-known hockey baseball player out of Virginia. And I was able to get on his staff for 5 years for at Richfield at that time. So that was really the Darby Hendrickson years. It was
Yeah, yeah.
tremendous.
I was just going to bring that up. You beat me to the punch. I was trying to find. I found a picture and I wanted you. I didn't see this picture, but I could have swore you were coaching during this time. Where is it now? I had the rich. This what year? I'm trying to think. 90.
That would have been
Either 90.
probably like 88 to 93, maybe. But I was there for 5 years.
Let me look at this picture here because this was a state tournament team. I don't see. I don't think I
Yeah.
see you on this picture. You're not
Let's
on here. I
see.
don't think. No,
Um, no,
this is
I'm
that was
not
when they
in
were in a
that
tournament.
picture, but
Okay.
Mike Thomas is up on the upper left-hand side, top row, and on the far
Yeah.
right is Jake McCoy,
Okay.
the famous Jimmy McCoy from coaching at Richfield. So that was really amazing to be part of that. Yeah, I can't remember who the other coach was. It might have been Eric Paulson, but that's not the year I was there. But
Yeah, okay.
um,
Okay. I think it was just that I was looking at it, it was 91. But but you mentioned the guy already beat me to the punch. Talk about this character when
oh
you're
boy,
helping out.
oh
Okay, so but and by the way, one other thing, was Rhodes there too when you were coaching, or was he gone already?
no, he was gone. He was gone.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
we had Darby and Danny on that team. We had Jason Williams who ended up playing Division 1 out east. Went to the state tournament. The last state tournament, I think it was 90 or 91 when it was just one class.
Yeah.
And Darby was amazing, not only as a player, but a great teammate to everybody and just did what was asked and was so humble and incredible guy. Probably one of the greatest student athletes I've ever been associated with. And yeah, I mean, it was really, we went to the state tournament that year. I think it was 90 or 91. And we ended up playing Duluth East in the first round. And, it's one of your old compatriots were the referees of that game. So I was really excited. It was Earl Anderson and I think
And
Smedzmo.
Small?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
okay.
were and I was thinking, oh, this is great, because I had played with Earl on a national team back in
Yeah.
the 70s. And Earl is a great guy. And I thought, this is great. I'm glad they're reffing. Well, we worked hard on this power play all week. And we get to that first game against East, and they don't call a penalty, and we got mauled. I mean, I was so mad at Earl and Smedzville after that game, but that's just the way it goes in the state tournament sometimes. But they beat us, and we ended up we actually beat Roseau and Blazers team for the consolation championship that year.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I was looking at that after I saw that, looking at that. Because in 90 Rose won it, and in 91, you guys just constellation champions. There you go. That's
Yeah,
the, and I was
yeah.
gonna pull it up, see if I could find that picture and show people that one, but there's so many different pictures. You're not on that one here, son of a gun. But anyway, be that as it may. Um, so we went from there with Richfield. Then you had a good run with Richfield, and boom, you're into the high school coaching of boys, and you also got involved with the women. So let's talk about the coaching. But before I do, because before you get into high school, I want to show this because I thought this was a cool picture.
Oh
My
yeah,
boys and you. Look at that. Huh? That's nice. That's a great picture. I love that one.
that was our backyard rink, and unfortunately, you can't see, but there was a big maple tree that was right to the right of Marty there. Anyhow, that's where all the kids hung out, back then. And, the outdoor rinks became a big part of our life. And that's where these guys learned their skills. And they didn't learn them from me. They just learned from playing. As you well know, the rink rats, they were good rink
Yeah.
rats. And it was fun. I did help out with their teams a little bit, and when I became the coach at Roseville, and even before when I was at Richfield, I tried to be involved in as a volunteer. But we had some great years there in Roseville. We had some good families and some good teams. The head coaching job came up. Gordy retired finally in probably, I think, 93 maybe, or 94. So I took over for Gordy and coached the boys for 9 years, and ended up with, probably our best teams. I don't think they've repeated since then, but we went to the state in 2002 and 2003.
I was going to say, isn't it a co-op now? Roseville doesn't have a team by itself anymore, I believe. Is that correct?
No, I think
Team
the
that we-
boys are still just Roseville. The
the
girls
girl-
are with
okay.
they're with
Yeah, yeah.
Montemedi. Yeah.
Sure. I just, when you mentioned that one Minneapolis school, I mean, it's a sign of the times of high school hockey in Minnesota. You don't have all the little schools anymore. There's a lot of co-ops, and Minneapolis has got one school, and St. Paul's got one school.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
the demographics has changed, and of course the cost has gotten to the point where that's a whole different topic to talk about all day. But it's just really changing the way the game is being played in
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
community. So yeah, I looked at that. In 2003, he went to the women. And the boys didn't, I'll pull up a couple pictures, but just to mention this again, you guys made the state tournament. I think he took third one year in the boys, if I
Yeah.
fourth, I forget. But then the girls, yeah, 62-21-2. He finished fourth in 2006, and he won Suburban East Conference in 04 and 05, and you didn't do too bad in both the boys and the girls there for Roseville area hockey. I mean, that's got to feel
And
pretty good.
a lot of the same families too, like I coached Colin Cody, who was one of our top players. And when I went to the girls' side, his sister was the top player. She ended up actually playing for me at Bemidji and will be inducted in the Hall of Fame in December. So that's another story. But the program was really strong. The girls, I mean, they had dominated for a long time with the Curtin girls and the Broad girls, and
Yeah.
they were a pretty solid program. That was an easy transition for me.
Oh, this is a picture from that, I think. So I didn't see the 03. Didn't have a picture on the vintage Minnesota, but this is the 02. And then
Yeah,
03, I'm gonna pull the bracket here in 03 too. I think this is where you guys took runner up that year.
yeah, we came awfully close.
Yeah, 2-1. 2-1. That's a tough loss there. But
Yeah.
boy, look at that. First round, another a tight one, 4-3, 4 white pair.
Yeah.
And then Roseville over ET, Lee Smith had a good run over there. He was coach, and then of course he ended up playing in Oakland that year and beating him. But some of these guys in this squad, I'm sure we're continuing on to the 03 team. Can you talk about some of these players here?
Yeah, we had a couple guys. There's you might have heard Mark Van Gilder. He was one of our captains in the top.
Yes.
Mark was a 3-sport athlete, went to Notre Dame, played hockey. I think he might have played a little lacrosse there too. Had a great career. Played in Milwaukee for a ton of years, and he was one of those guys that got the one game in the NHL with Nashville.
Yep.
But there were a number of kids that played after high school from that team, for Bethel and Augsburg, and we had a pretty talented group there, and fun kids. Always grateful to be around good not only good hockey players but good kids too.
That's the thing. I mean, remember that Van Gilder name? Just to say you played one game in NHL, I don't care who you are. It's such a difficult feat to try and make that and just to play one game. I mean, he can go to his grave and say, "Well, I played in the NHL. I only played one game, but I played."
Yeah,
And that is
no
something.
kidding.
That is something. Everybody I
Absolutely.
talk to that played pro, it's like, hey, if you played one game, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of players worldwide trying to make it. So good for
A-
him. Good for him.
Absolutely.
So it's screwed over now. I'm going to pull up this bracket. You guys were, I think, the girls. This is one year.
Yep. Yep.
Here's, I was it fourth or third that year. I forget what the.
We lost to Coon Rapids for the third place game in that year.
So this would have been. And here's another picture of the girls. This is '06 squad. Some of these girls here.
Yeah.
You talk
Um,
some of these kids. I mean, I'm trying to find pictures from the squads. Back it goes
yeah.
back 20 years now, so it's tough kind of find some of these things. But some of the girls in this squad. I'm assuming there was a Van Gilder. You mentioned his she's got to be on here too. I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Um,
there were two Van Gilder girls, uh, Cody, um, um, Franny Dorr, whose brother played for us on the boys team. She ended up coming to Bemidji too. So I had two girls off this team, three girls. Babineau came up too. So I had three
okay.
girls that played at Bemidji for me too. And then again, a number of them played, in the MIAC and had good hockey careers too.
That's just being able to push kids, not push, but I mean help them move on to the next level, and then also in life. That's the biggest part of coaching is hey, you want to win, but you also want your players to end up being good people when they become adults after they're playing the game. So I think you did a phenomenal job with that. But there's a couple of things we're talking about high school hockey here before we move on to the college aspect. Is that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, you were inducted in the Minnesota High School Hockey Coaches Hall of Fame in 2010. So can you talk about that? Just that fact. I mean, I've been at a few of those events. I was there when my coach was inducted, Coach Wilkinson, who, by the way, was behind one of the Hendricksons, and Larry, he liked to talk. So
Yeah.
that's all he would talk. But that whole being inducted into that, can you discuss that? Because that's part of a pretty elite group of people.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that up because I sometimes don't even think about it, and it really was a significant honor to be included with some of those great coaches that you and I knew and heard of, and um, I've had I was lucky I had a good staff of coaches that helped me at Roseville, and like I said, the families were awesome, and to be included in that was really an honor, and yeah, I'm really proud of
Yeah.
being in with some of those names, right?
And actually, that was the same year. Now that I mention it, I was there that year because I was doing broadcasting. That was Coach Wilkinson was there with you, Larry Henderson, yourself, John McNamara, and Steve Sertich. So yeah, ironically that was the case. But yeah, just looking at all these names too, you go back, amazing. I think of some of the names that have been inducted into this Hall of Fame, and you're part of that. And the list
Yeah,
continues to grow. So
yeah,
that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So let's talk a bit now. We talked about the Coaches Hall of Fame and the high school hockey, both the men's and the women, the girls and the boys, and going on. But then you moved on to a little bit of state. How did that come about? How did you get moved into that? I know Coach Olson was up there for a while, and then he can fill in the gaps or what happened. But I think he got let go, and then who reached out to you? How did it end up going up to the Bemidji State? Because you had a nice little run there too.
yeah. After coaching in Roseville, it was kind of uh, a significant time in my life because my wife died in '05 from a brain tumor. So, we went through a couple of years there where it was pretty, life was on the edge. We had um, Marty and Mike, both boys were at CC. Mike actually walked on that particular year that Marty ended up winning the Hobie Baker. And we spent a lot of time down at the Mayo Clinic and going out to CC. And, it was a bittersweet year
Yeah, yeah,
for us. And she she made it until the Hobie was in Columbus, Ohio that year. That team was in the Final Four. Um, they didn't win the championship, but they had a great team, and Marty had a great year. And so a lot of things happened, in my life and our lives. And I always had kind of an itch to coach at the college level. And when all this came about, both the good and the bad,
Yeah,
I I I was looking around. I mean, I thought maybe I'll give it a whirl, and Bemidji opened up, and I threw my name in there, and my daughter helped me with my resume. She was kind of my agent, and I went up for an interview, and luckily got the job. I mean, it was chaotic up at Bemidji at that time. Bruce was let go in the middle of his last year in his contract. The players were, had a tough time in a lot of ways, and so I kind of jumped in a tough spot, but they responded well. We had a decent first year. A lot of the players on that team were seniors that year, and they had gone through some tough times, and I was happy to be part of that. And then I got to recruit some of our own kids, from the
sure.
cities, and the Roseville kids. And yeah, I was there for 8 years. We opened that new Sanford Center in
I was
Bemidji,
just
and
gonna say, yeah.
I worked. Tom Sertich was the men's coach. He was another Iron Ranger. So I
Yeah.
had, and Bob Peters was still a big force in the city there at that time. Um, and then I met my second wife up there too, which is that's the gal from Winona where you hang out
Okay,
now,
okay, okay.
which is kind of a funny story because she was actually on the hiring committee. She- um, she was
Oh, I
part.
see how it is.
Yeah, this is a good one. She was there was probably about 10 people that were on staff that were on the committee, and she was one. She was a Phi Ed teacher, teaching kids how to teach Phi Ed. And yeah, one thing led to another. Once I got the
Yeah,
job, she was right down the hall, and uh, yeah, we're still
hey,
together today.
that's well, good for you, good for you. And I wanted to go back to because I kind of skimmed over because I was going to go back, but you mentioned your son. That was the year that was kind of tough. I threw this up when we were talking. Obviously, there's Marty, and this one just caught my eye. I mean, the good and the bad. I mean, she was just
Yeah,
so grateful to be able to be there for that, and yeah, that was kind of pulls at your heartstrings, so to speak, to see that. But just so proud moment there. You can see her looking at him like, "You made it. You did it." So
yeah,
that's
and she was a great lady, and was a big part of a lot of lives, and but obviously, especially for my kids. And she hung in there. We made those trips out to Columbus for the Final Four and got through that. And she didn't make it much longer after that. But um, Marty, I would say was a lot like Darby. He was not only talented, but he was a good teammate, and easy to coach. My son Mike those two guys played together at Roseville for a couple of years, and Mike was a little bit more like me. He was a speedster, and really good with his stick chopping that I think probably he inherited from me. But anyhow, he had a good high school career too, and walked on at CC, and was with that group actually the year they were in the Final Four. So I was pretty lucky actually to coach them both and then get to watch them play at CC in those years.
yeah, that's pretty cool to see that. When you're an alumni, and you end up watching your sons play there, and one of them win the biggest trophy of all from college hockey, the Hobie. So it's pretty awesome. So I kind of hop back, like I said, but I wanted to hop forward again. And I don't have any team pictures per se, but I had pictures. Obviously, I showed that earlier in the Facebook. I showed you at a press conference, but I'm going to throw up a couple pictures of a couple players that stuck out to me because one of which is I'm in the goalie union, so I'm always partial towards goalies. But I gotta like, hey, this one she was an Olympian, and the other one was Olympian too. But this one was an Olympian for played for you between the pipes and won the Big B award for the IHF. That's phenomenal. This young lady right here, Susanna, was show without her face mask on, catching a puck. That's a pretty cool picture. Um, Susanna, yeah,
Tom
well, I
Sh-
can't pronounce the last name.
Tom Shevkova.
Okay, you got
And
it. What you said?
we lucked out on that one, Sid. You have to have goaltenders, and especially in the WCHA on the women's side, when you have Wisconsin and Minnesota and UMD at that time, those powerhouses, they had the puck more than we did, and we lucked out. We just found out that this gal was she was their national goalie in Slovakia at that time, and made a couple connections. And um, I mean, we never watched her play in person, but she was almost 6 feet tall, and had great stats over there. Slovakia was not a powerhouse on the girls' side at that time, but she was she was outstanding, and she came and she played 4 years for us. She was an All-American. She, you know, to this day has many records, obviously goaltending records at Bemidji State, and was inducted in the Bemidji State Hockey Hall of or the Athletic Hall of Fame
Oh,
probably
sorry.
about 6 years ago, maybe. And what a great kid too. So yeah,
I just saw his stats, Steve, and I'm like, that's not bad. 118 wins, 2.32, and 0.929 save percentage per career there. And I kind of partial towards Slovakia because I had a Slovakian goalie here I coached, and I keep in touch with those guys over there. Like your son,
sure.
he's coached a few, and so if she was playing and I was broadcasting, I would have been saying nobody, 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 meaning good, 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 goodie. She was a goodie. Now,
Yeah,
going from the goalie side to the other side, which is in front of the goalie, because the goalie's always the last line of defense. But then there's this defense. I think she played defense for you.
yeah,
She was also Nina. I can
yeah,
pronounce her first name, but again, the last name I'm gonna leave that to you. So Nina from
yeah. It
Germany,
was
I think she was.
Nina. I'm trying to think of her last, if I could say her last name, but it was like
Ziegenholz.
Ziegenhals. Yeah, and she just played 1 year for us. Um, but I have to share a story about Nina. So in her senior year, she had an opportunity to go back to Germany halfway through the season to finish up. So we were in Grand Forks, we're playing North Dakota, and the girls on the team wanted to do a going away party for Nina. And we're at the hotel, and they had practiced the German national anthem for her. They were going to sing it to Nina as a, kind of a joke, obviously. But unfortunately, they picked the Nazi anthem, which is illegal. And when they started singing that, I thought Nina was going to fall out of her chair. I mean, she was in shock that they first of all learned a German song, but it was the
Not
Nazi anthem, and it's one of my favorite memories. I mean, she just said, "Hey, you guys can't do this. It's against the law."
oh my, that's a good story. That's a good
uh,
hockey story. It's funny. I mean, it's funny,
that
but
that
it's not
was
funny. But
yeah.
good intentions, though. Good intentions.
Oh, it was great. It was funny.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That is,
The
you
other
can't make that stuff up.
I know. The other gal I should mention was Erin Cody, who Erin came up from Roseville and played for us, and I think she might be maybe second all-time leading scorer up there now. But Erin will be inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame at Bemidji State in December. And while she was there, she happened to meet a young man by the name of Matt Reed, who ended up playing. He
Ah,
was
yes,
one of the
yes.
one of the Beaver hockey players, and had a pro career with Philadelphia and maybe somebody else. But they got married. They have two or three young hockey players, and from what I hear, they're awfully good. So it doesn't surprise me.
Good genetics, we'll say. Good genetics.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. So after that, I was going to say after coaching there, now you're involved. Are you still involved? I know you're involved with the Hockey Hall of Fame here in Evelyn. Were you involved with that still, or can you talk? Were you a little bit involved with that?
Yeah, one of my neighborhood friends was Tom Rukavina, who was the representative up in the Virginia area for probably 25 years. And he asked me to join, the board at the Hockey Hall of Fame with, David Tomasoni was the head guy. Buzzy was on there. Lefty Curran was part of it. And so I was on that committee for probably 4 or 5 years. In fact, while I was on there, I got the Hall of Fame game on the women's side started. We played a Hall of Fame game in Eveleth. We played one in Coleraine, and I'm glad it's really built up to be kind of a special event now in their season.
That's pretty awesome. I think the men's game this year is held out. I think there's something in Austin this year.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just yeah, it's got to be a big thing. So I wanted to discuss it, if you don't mind me asking, talking a bit about this because we're going to kind of wind down unless you have something else we want to bring up. But a couple things. Women's hockey then versus now, especially on the collegiate level and the international level. I mean, watching it back in the day, I'm like, yeah, Aaron Broughton kind of jokingly said, "Well, I'd rather bring up, just bring a book to the game." That's how I felt about it back then. But now it's like vastly changed, and I don't know. Maybe you would know more so than me. I mean, they rub out in hockey, but I think they might want to install maybe some checking. I correct me if I'm wrong, but tell me a little bit about you, what you've seen in the change of the game in women's hockey, and just in general compared to today's game.
Yeah, when it first started Roseville had pretty good high school girls teams right off the bat because those Brote and Curtin girls played with our boys, right up
Yep.
to. In fact, Winnie was on our JV team my first year at Roseville. She was on the JV, and I was worried about her trying to play varsity hockey because she was so small,
Yeah, yeah.
and the game so physical. But anyhow, I remember watching the girls practice sometimes up there, and I'm thinking, what a waste of an hour of ice time, and I was
Yep.
so down on it. And then I started running the hockey schools in the summer in Roseville and got to know some of these gals, and they were pretty good. I mean, they were talented, and they could skate with the boys at those Pee Wee Bantam levels. And obviously Roseville's team, I think they won the state 4 or 5 times back in those days. And so it just got better, and then by the time I coached the girls in 06, and when I took over, Sid, I told him, I said, I'm not going to be the girls coach. I'm still just a hockey coach, and we're going to just do it the way we've always done it. And, I think for the most part, they appreciated that. And they were really skilled. I mean, we had some pretty skilled players. When I went to Bemidji, it was like David and Goliath out there. I mean, we were playing Wisconsin and Minnesota, and I mean, the shots were 45-8.
That's why you
Yeah,
need that good Slovakian goaltender.
yeah, exactly. She kept us in, but the top teams were amazing. I remember when they changed the icing rule, where you couldn't change after an icing. And
Yep.
we were playing Wisconsin, and Wisconsin had probably 4 or 5 Olympians. They had Hillary Knight, they had Duggan, they had Lawler, they had all these. I mean, they were incredible, right? We couldn't get those kids off the ice. I mean,
Oh,
I swear to God, they were out there for 5 minutes. We couldn't ice it, and we couldn't get out of the zone. And so my point is, as good as the hockey was, we weren't even close to those teams. We were just barely surviving. And we got a little bit better as the years went on, where we could compete and skate with them. And now there's so much parity at the college level, at least in the WCHA. It's amazing how much it's improved, and how skilled they are, how fast they are, how hard they shoot. It's come a long way since even my first year at Bemidji.
sure, sure. I know I may be going on a rabbit hole, but I'm just curious because, I've been around the game a lot too myself. I didn't coach at a high level, but I've been involved with different communities and that. And I am always curious from someone like yourself who's been in the game for quite a while, the parent side. Let's talk about high school more so than college, because I don't think college, obviously, they dip in the bundle of it. How did you deal with that? Because an old sage coach of mine as a Pee Wee, I saw him being interviewed, Dickie Johnson. You may remember the name, Dick Johnson up in Roseau. He said,
Yeah.
Sid, and he was interviewed by Wally Saber on Let's Play Hockey broadcast or Roseau. He said, any advice for young coaches? He said, don't let the unnecessary egos get to you. So how did you deal with that? Because I mean, being a boys coach, women's coach, it doesn't matter. There's always the helicopter parents out there. Can you just give me your what and this is off the cuff. I'd like to know how you deal with it. What your thoughts are, because there's still people out there that think little Johnny, little Jane is the best thing since sliced bread, yet he or she can't skate or pass the puck or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
asking you as a Hall of Fame coach, just being honest with me.
Well, one of my theories was I always told my assistant coaches, make sure you know where the exit doors are to get out of the rink. I mean, you don't walk through the lobby, you get out of there right after the game. And, you hear a lot of crazy stories of coaches who you know, um, get into some conversations after a game or after a practice. And I really was good at avoiding that. There's no way. And almost to the point where, even socially, when you're in a community, I avoided a lot of situations just because I didn't want to talk with parents about their kids, you know, outside of the rink or whatever. And I think there was a point in my coaching career where it was like a revelation for me that I just felt like I know what I'm doing. Um, I'm gonna stick with it no matter what, people say or comment on. And it just worked for me. I just kind of became, I don't know what the term is, but a believer in what I was doing to the point where I just wouldn't let stuff bother me that much. Because a lot of it hurts. I mean, you get phone calls, and I got anonymous letters. I remember I got one in Virginia where it was an anonymous letter, and they were accusing me of favoring kids from Northside Catholics and something else. And I thought, what are they talking about? I mean, and so anyhow,
I
I
just
felt like
wanted
I
to,
had a way to get through it.
yeah, I was just curious because I see it all the time. I mean, I see guys. I have friends that were coaching and that get run out. Um, and there are a lot of people that coach that. And it's just a challenging thing to deal with nowadays. Not only as a coach, but I've refereed. I mean, not hockey, but I've officiated some games before as youth sports, and that's the other thing. It's difficult for getting the youth to come into coaching now and into refereeing being official because of that parenting. And I just think something needs to be done. I don't know. It's my 2 cents, your 2 cents, and that's why I was curious about your thoughts on that. I think, it's been used many, many times before, too. They said one of the things they'd rather coach the best team they don't eat coach is an orphanage. So they'll deal with the parents. I mean, it's been
Yeah,
used a lot. But
yeah, it's
I just
it's
wanted
not
your feedback.
easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not easy. And I talked to some of my former assistants who are still coaching, and it's a tough deal. I don't know if that'll ever go away, really.
You're gonna have thick skin. And I always say I'm not out there to make friends. I'm out there to make your children, your parent, your child a better person, a better athlete.
Yeah,
It's just tough. Sometimes you got to be on, thin ice, but it is what it is.
yeah.
So I'm kind of winding down. I've been over an hour time here. And, I just want to throw it back to you. Was there anything that you want to make note of before I ask the last couple questions for you, Steve? Because there's always
Well,
things that I may touch on and I forget. So what would you like to bring up that we didn't talk about already?
yeah, I really didn't get a chance to touch on my brother Mike, who
Oh my gosh, yeah, 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 yeah.
who was my idol growing up. It's
Pete sakes.
here we are in Virginia, Minnesota. Virginia actually, Sid, wasn't a great hockey city early on. I mean, Eveleth was the dominant force up there, in our particular area. And my brother actually ski jumping was a big winter thing up there at that time. All the little towns had ski jumping clubs, and my dad belonged to it. And they would go to Ely, they would go to Coleraine, Duluth, and my brother started out ski jumping, and somehow got hooked on hockey. And that was I idolized my brother. I mean, he was 5.5 years older than me, and he was a really good athlete. And when he started playing hockey, I started playing hockey,
Yeah.
and so that kind of got me into it. But I wanted to mention him in as a high school. He died 2 years ago, almost exactly, and I was looking through a lot of his scrapbooks, and he had an incredible high school athletic career. I mean, he was his class was probably the greatest athletic class in Virginia high school history. It was the class of 65, but even 64, 65, they were dominant in football. They were dominant in baseball, swimming, basketball, and he was one of their top running backs and linebackers in football. They were unbeaten his senior year. They didn't have, a playoff system at that time, but I'm sure they would have gone to the state tournament if they did. They had a guy by the name of Eric Norrie who ended up playing for Ara Parseghian at Notre Dame.
Oh, geez.
But he was a outstanding baseball player. They went to the state in baseball in 65. He was getting feelers from Minnesota and some pro stuff. Unfortunately, he had a really bad state tournament. I'll never forget that. He just, he was a really good hitter, but he had a terrible state tournament, and that kind of ended. And he was going to go to North Dakota to play football. And he was a fullback, and this guy by the name of Dale Olavanti was a halfback, and they were, as a team, going to go to North Dakota. Well, Dale that summer after high school got killed in a motorcycle accident.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So that put the kiboshes on that, and he goes to UMD and walks on as a hockey player. I think hockey really was probably his poorest sport as a player. I mean, he was an all-conference Iron Range player, but he was better in those other sports, I think. Anyhow, he ends up at UMD and walked on, didn't play a lot, but he was a regular, I think, by the time he graduated. And then got into coaching and teaching. He ends up in Grand Rapids with Gus Hendrickson. And, they built that program, and, they just celebrated, I think, the 76 championship team last week. But Mike went with Gus to UMD, ended up being his assistant there. And then, Gus got let go, and Mike was kind of in a tough position because he really didn't know if he should take it. He felt bad about it, and ended up, becoming one of their great coaches. They had such a tremendous time there.
I looked at that. I think, Steve, if I'm correct, I saw something. 350 wins, 320 losses, and 44 was his coaching career there. I think at UMD. 18 seasons, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah.
I mean, some phenomenal teams. I mean, look at some of the Hobie Baker award winners he had. Like Watson was there, and McIver. And not to mention Brad Hall played for him. And I remember that
Yep.
year that they lost. Rick Costi was the goalie because I followed them. I think Bowling Green beat him that year. But they just had some phenomenal teams, and just I apologize. I'm glad you brought that up because I had a picture of him. There's so much to be talked about. His brother there. He rest in peace, and it's hard to believe he's been gone 2 years now. But then he didn't quit coaching after that. He went on to coach still a little bit more, if I remember right.
Yeah. He volunteered at Hermantown, I think, on their Bantam team. He had a lot of those kids that went on and played in the NHL. And then he went to Tech. He was at Michigan Tech for probably 2.5 years. And, that's when Marty was graduating from high school. And now he had to make it, he grew up. We used to go up and watch the Bulldogs, when Mike was coaching, and the kids got to sit in the locker room, got to, meet Brad Hall. We did all that. And by the time Marty was getting recruited, he had to choose between CC and Michigan Tech. And that was tough because, it's hard to say no to your uncle, right?
Yeah.
But
I was just
it worked out.
I was going to say with Mike, you really had to love the game because when you look at Michigan Tech, those were good years. I
Yeah.
mean, I think he had, if I'm correct, I mean, geez, he had probably yeah, 26 wins in 3 years, and multiple losses. So you really have to love the game of coaching to go be a coach in a team like that because they were at the bottom. They had a great pep band. Michigan Tech's known for their pep band, but
Yeah.
not so much hockey. I mean, so just to love the game. So it just tells you a lot about why we coach, and he loved coaching. And I just, it's too bad he's not around to talk to him personally because I would love to get his thoughts on the game as well. But now we're living it through you, Steve. I appreciate you doing this. So we talked about Michael a bit. So we're going to wind it down here, but any last thoughts before asking my last question? I mean, anything else that you'd like to discuss? Because there's so much that you've been around hockey for many years.
Yeah, no, I think we kind of touched on everything, Sid,
Okay,
to a certain degree.
sure. Well, I'll leave it like this then. It's how I do with everybody I interview, former coaches, former players. If I'm a young athlete, I come up to Steve Sertich, and it could be any sport, but when we talk about hockey, but it's any sport. So, Mr. Sertich, what advice would you give to me? I want to be a better person, a better athlete. I want to get to the next level, whether it's junior college, juniors, Division two, Division three, Division one, minor pro, whatever. I want to be that next level. What advice would you tell me as a young athlete coming up to you and asking you that? What would you give me?
Well, I think um, you have to outwork everybody. You have to put the extra time in, and I felt like I did that as a young athlete. I didn't do the party scene or anything like that growing up through high school. I just felt like I had to work out and do more than the next guy, and it's a sacrifice. Um, and I think athletes today have to do the same thing. I think they have to put the time in, even though it might be tougher now than it was when I was a kid, but there's so much out there. But the work ethic is key for me, and to be a good teammate, and to be humble and um, respect your coaches and um, but I think the work ethic thing is probably my biggest piece of advice.
Wise advice. So I appreciate that. The outwork aspect and the good teammate is very important because scouts nowadays they look. I remember talking to Kuchar, Tony Kuchar talked about it. And I was he was breaking those records, and they asked him, "What's he like as as a teammate, as a person, not as a they knew about the stats, but what kind of person is he?" And that's another reason why we coaches we want to make you a better person after the game is done.
Right.
And those are sage piece of advice from a coach that's been around the game once or twice, and the coaches all the time here in Minnesota. Steve, I really want to thank you for this. I appreciate you doing this, and shedding some light on your brother a little bit too, as well as your son and your sons, excuse me, the game. And it's been my pleasure. That's why I do this. I like to tell the stories, and um, I again want to thank you for taking the time today to sit down with me and talk about hockey. So with that, no, we'll call it quits. And again, this was Steve Sertich, uh, a former coach, former player, uh, just a great all-around person and a hockey guy. So from the Sertich family. So I thank you again, Steve. So on that note, folks, so
Thank you,
long.
Sid.
You're very welcome. Thank you.